Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday, it was widely reported that China launched a massive attack, a cyber attack, against the United States and our infrastructure. This incident is just one single event in a decades-long cyber warfare campaign launched against the United States. We should not expect these threats to lessen and should continue to engage with the proper stakeholders to determine how best to defend our infrastructure. And one of the things that's so important is what each of you has touched on here today, how artificial intelligence is going to empower and equip and enable malicious cyber actors to do potential harm to the United States and our infrastructure. I'd like to start by returning to something you mentioned, Mr. Stamos. I was interested in this point during your testimony with Mr. Jimenez. You described a scenario where artificial intelligence malware could essentially deploy within critical infrastructure on an air-gapped network. Can you share with us a little bit more about how you visualize that threat occurring? How would it get to the air-gapped network in the first place?
Right. So, the example I was using is the most famous example of this is Stuxnet, where the exact mechanism which the jump to air gap has not been totally determined. But one of the theories is that Stuxnet was spread pretty widely among the Iranian population, and somebody made a mistake. They charged a phone, they plugged in their iPod at home, and then that it jumped on the USB device into the network. And so there are constantly, whenever you work with like secure air gap networks, there are constant mistakes that are being made where people hook them up, people bring devices in, stuff like that.
Thank you. And Ms. Moore, I'd like to go back to your point when you talked about really the inevitability that there will be incidents, that there will be vulnerabilities, and that one of the things that we can do that's most productive is to focus on resilience, recovery, rebuilding. You've had unique experience working before in federal government on several cybersecurity initiatives. Would you share with us your perspective on how DHS and CISA can best be thinking about those concepts and how we should be measuring success and performance in that way?
That's a very good question. I think that one of the things that we have to move away from in general is measuring based on compliance and the knowledge only of that we have around what we know is a known threat. And so again, the way I said earlier, that we spend a lot of time sort of cataloging all of our concerns. And I think that when you look at industry, and you look at industry globally, and you look at the power of AI, and you consider the way that we manage markets today, the way that we have transactional data moving all over the globe in context, and we have the ability to have that information in front of us in real time, that's the way security needs to be. That's the way threat intelligence needs to be. It needs to be that way across all sectors, but curated for the specific sector. And so it'd be a way of sort of having a common record of knowledge amongst all of the critical infrastructure players and DHS and the FCEBs, and something that we could rely on that would be expedient in helping us to at least stay ahead of the threat.
And as far as the EO itself that directs DHS to develop a pilot project within the federal civilian executive branch systems, is there any specific information that you think would be helpful for DHS and CISA to share with the private sector as they determine lessons learned from the pilot?
For me? Yes, I think that there is extreme importance around what we consider to be iterative learning. In the same way that AI models go out and they train themselves literally train themselves iteratively, we need to do the same thing. So in so many instances throughout global enterprises everywhere, we have lessons learned, but they're not always shared completely, nor do we model these threats in a way that we learn collectively where the gaps are and do that consistently.
And Mr. O'Neill, a question for you. Do you find that generally companies in the private sector are considering the cybersecurity background risk profile of artificial intelligence products when deciding whether to use them? And how can CISA better encourage that type of use of AI that is secure by design?
Thank you for the question. I'm a big fan of CISA, especially with the guidance, the tactical and strategic information they're providing to businesses about threat actors and so forth. In their secure by design, one of the things they call for is doing threat modeling. And when you're designing applications and systems and so forth, if you're doing the threat modeling, you're basically now having to contend with and understand that you're going to be attacked by automated systems or having AI used against you. So I think that helps. Sorry, don't know what that is. Oh.
Not to
That
worry.
would be one thing. The other thing I would recommend to CISA would be they're very focused on giving great information about the type of exploits that attackers are using, and it really helps with defenses and so forth. But again, if they could take some of that leadership focused on resiliency, preparedness, and recovery, so that the companies, once it's a matter of time that you will likely have an event. It's how you are able to respond to that event. And there's many companies, such as the one that I work for, that help companies prepare for the inevitable event to be able to recover and so forth. But having the workaround procedures, especially for critical infrastructure, to get that working and functional so that it can carry out its mission while the recovery occurs, that type of thing, and having your data secured so that it's available and before the attackers got to it, encrypted it, and you can go to a known good copy and stuff is very important. I think they could expand their scope a little more to help companies to be able to really have the workaround procedures and the testing and so forth, just like they do the red team testing to find the vulnerabilities and try to prevent the issues, but also on the backside to recover and learn from the incidents to drive continuous improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.